the dust has a way of settling into the creases of a man's hands, so deep that no amount of lye, soap, or scrubbing can ever truly wash it away. In West Virginia, in the hollows where the sun rises late and sets early behind the ridges, they say you can tell a coal miner not by his helmet, but by his knuckles. They are maps of the mountain, etched with the black geography of the seams he has chased into the dark. But this story isn't just about the coal. It isn't just about the drag lines, the shuttle cars, or the miles of conveyor belts that hum like a sleeping giant beneath the earth. This is a story about the light that waits at the top of the shaft. It is a story about the kind of love that holds its breath every time the shift whistle blows, and the woman who learned that loving a miner means loving the mountain that tries to keep him. This is the story of Elias and Sarah. It was 1974 in McDowell County. The coal boom was alive, breathing smoke and money into the small towns that clung to the sides of the Appalachian hills like barnacles on a ship. Elias Thorne was 26 years old, built like a timber prop tall, broad-shouldered, and sturdy. He was a third-generation miner, a man who had followed his father and his grandfather into the darkness of the number 4 mine. It wasn't a choice, really. In those days, in that place, the mine wasn't a job, it was a destiny. It was the gravity that held the town of Black Creek together. Elias was a continuous miner operator. He ran the massive machine with a rotating drum of steel teeth that chewed through the mountain's ribs to tear out the black gold. It was loud, dangerous work. The air down there was thick, heavy with the smell of sulfur and ancient earth. When you are 2 miles deep, the silence of the world above feels like a dream you once had. Down there, the only reality is the roar of the cutter, the groan of the roof bolts taking the weight, and the white beam of your cap lamp cutting through the dust. But Elias didn't mind the dark. He was a quiet man, accustomed to the solitude of the noise. What he minded was the emptiness he felt when he showered off the grime at the end of the day. He would walk back to his small company house, the gravel crunching under his boots, and the silence of his kitchen was louder than any machine. That was, until the Autumn Harvest Festival. The town of Black Creek didn't have much, but it had community. Once a year, they strung lights between the sycamore trees in the town square. There was apple butter bubbling in copper kettles, the sound of a fiddle cutting through the crisp October air, and the smell of roasting corn. Elias had gone mostly out of obligation. His mother had told him he was turning into a hermit, more stone than man, and that he needed to see the sky for a change. He was standing near the edge of the crowd, holding a cup of cider, feeling out of place in his clean shirt. His hands, even scrubbed raw, still showed the faint grey lines of his trade. He felt rough, unfinished compared to the bright colors and laughter of the town. Then he saw her, Sarah Miller. She was the new teacher at the elementary school, having moved down from Wheeling. She wasn't from the coalfields. She didn't have that hardened look in her eyes that the local women developed earlier, the look of waiting. She was laughing at something a child had said, her face illuminated by the string lights. She wore a yellow dress that seemed to hold the sunlight, even now that it was dark. To Elias, who spent 12 hours a day in a world of absolute black and grey, that yellow dress was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He didn't know how to approach her. What does a man who speaks in hand signals and grunts to a crew of miners say to a woman who teaches poetry? But fate, or perhaps the boldness that comes from loneliness, moved his feet. "The evening," he said, his voice deep and gravelly, sounding too loud in his own ears. Sarah turned. Her eyes were green, bright and intelligent. She looked up at him. He towered over her and she didn't flinch. She smiled. "Good evening. You're Elias, aren't you? One of my students, little Timmy, says you're the strongest man in the county." Elias blushed, the heat rising up his neck. "Timmy exaggerates. I just move rocks, ma'am." "Sarah," she corrected him gently, "and I don't think moving mountains is just anything. It sounds like hard work." "It's work," Elias said. keeps the lights on." "It does," she said, her gaze dropping to his hands, then back to his eyes. There was no judgment in her look, only curiosity. "Would you care to dance, Elias? Or are your feet too tired from moving those mountains?" They danced. It was a slow waltz, the fiddle crying out a sweet, mournful tune. Elias held her as if she were made of glass, terrified his rough, calloused hands would snag the fabric of her dress. But she held him tight. She smelled like vanilla and chalk dust, a scent so clean and sharp it made his head spin. For the first time in his life, the weight of the mountain lifted off his shoulders. That was the beginning. The courtship of a coal miner is a romance dictated by the whistle. Their love grew in the margins of his shift work. Elias worked the swing shift often, going down at 3 in the afternoon and coming up at midnight. It meant their time was stolen in the mornings or on precious Sundays. He would wake up at 10, his body aching from the vibrations of the continuous miner. He'd drink his coffee black, staring out the window at the mist rolling off the hills, counting the minutes until he could see her. She would come by on her lunch break, or he would walk her home after school before he had to head to the bathhouse. Sarah was fascinated by his world, though it frightened her. She would ask him to describe it. It's like being in the belly of a whale," Elias told her one afternoon, sitting on the porch swing of her rental house. "The air is different. It's recycled. You breathe in what the fans push down. And it's dark, Sarah, not like nighttime dark. It's a heavy dark. You can feel it pressing on your skin." "Why do you do it?" she asked, tracing the scar on his forearm where a slate flake had cut him years ago. "You're smart, Elias. You read more than anyone I know. You could do something else." Elias looked at the distant Tipple, the black structure rising against the green slope. "It's what we do. It's what my daddy did. And it pays. I want things, Sarah. I want to buy that plot of land up on Hickory Ridge. I want to build a house that catches the sunrise. I can't do that bagging groceries." He didn't say the rest. He didn't say, "I want to build that house for you." As the months turned into a year, the town of Black Creek began to see them as a unit. Elias and Sarah, the giant and the teacher. But the tension of the mine was always there, a third wheel in their relationship. There were nights when Sarah would wait up for him, grading papers, watching the clock. If he was 10 minutes late, her heart would hammer against her ribs. She learned the terrifying language of the mining town. She learned that one long blast of the siren meant the shift change, 2 short blasts meant a mechanical failure, and 3 long wailing blasts meant accident. She hated the coal dust. It was an adversary she fought daily. When Elias came to her house, even after showering, the fine particulate seemed to follow him. It was in the creases of his neck, in his ears. She would take a warm washcloth and gently wipe his face, an act of intimacy that bonded them. She was cleaning away the world that tried to consume him. One evening in late November, the first snow dusting the ground, Elias took her up to Hickory Ridge. He had saved enough. He had bought the land. "I'm going to put the porch right here," he said, gesturing to a clearing that overlooked the valley, "so you can drink your tea and watch the fog lift." Sarah looked at him, wrapped in her wool coat, her breath clouding in the air. "Elias, yeah. Are you asking me to live here?" He turned to her, pulling a small velvet box from his heavy jacket pocket. His hands, scarred and trembling slightly, opened it. Inside was a modest diamond, hard-won with overtime shifts and double backs. "I'm asking you to make it a home, Sarah. I'm asking you to be my wife." She said yes. They kissed in the cold mountain air, and for a moment the future seemed bright and clear. But the mountain is jealous. It doesn't like to let go of its own. The trouble started in the spring, 2 months before the wedding. The geology in Section 5 of the mine began to change. The coal seam dipped, and the roof rock above it became unstable. Kettle bottoms, the old-timers called them petrified tree stumps, hidden in the shale that could drop without warning, crushing anything beneath them. Elias came home on Tuesday evening, quieter than usual. He didn't eat the pot roast Sarah had made. He just sat at the table, staring at his hands. "What is it?" Sarah asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Nothing," he lied, but she knew. "Elias, tell me." "Bad roof today," he muttered. "Big Jim." A slab came down, missed him by inches, took the mirror off the shuttle car. If he'd been leaning out, Elias trailed off. He took a shuddering breath. "It's getting soft up there. The bolts aren't holding like they should." Sarah's face went pale. "Then don't go back." Elias looked at her, confused. "What? Don't go back. Quit. Tomorrow." "Sarah, I can't just quit. We have the land, the wedding. I need to pay for the lumber, for the framing." "I don't care about the lumber." Sarah's voice rose, sharp with fear. "I don't care about the house, Elias. We can live in a trailer. We can live in a tent for all I care. I can't live with this waiting. Every time you leave, I feel like I'm holding my breath for 10 hours. It's my job, Sarah. It's who I am. It's not who you are. It's just what you do. And it's going to kill you. If the roof doesn't get you, the black lung will. I hear you coughing in the morning, Elias. You think I don't. You're 27, and you cough like an old man." It was their first real fight, and it was brutal because it was born of love. Elias felt attacked. He felt his pride being stripped away. He was providing the only way he knew how. Sarah felt desperate. She saw a future where she was a widow at 30, clutching a folded American flag. "It's the mine, or me, Elias," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I can't marry a tombstone." Elias stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm not quitting, Sarah. I've got a crew relying on me. I've got a responsibility." He walked out. He went back to his own company house and sat in the dark, drinking whiskey, feeling the anger and the fear warring in his gut. He knew she was right about the danger, but he also knew the code. You don't abandon your brothers in the hole, and you don't walk away from the only paycheck that can build a dream. They didn't speak for 3 days. The silence between them was heavier than the rock overhead. Elias went to work. Sarah went to school. The town watched and whispered. Thursday, the graveyard shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Elias was operating the continuous miner in Section 5. The air was muggy. The ventilation fans were roaring, but the dust hung thick, a fog of pulverized carbon. He was angry. He was thinking about Sarah, about the look on her face when he walked out. He was attacking the coal face with aggressive force, the machine bucking and grinding. "Easy, Elias. Watch the top." His foreman, Miller, shouted over the din. Elias throttled back. He looked up at the roof. It looked slick, wet, bad sign. He had a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach, the kind the old miner said you should never ignore. He reached for the lever to back the machine out, to set a temporary prop. That was when the world ended. It wasn't a bang. It was a hump, a dull, concussive thud that vibrated through his teeth. The air pressure changed instantly, popping his ears. Then, the roar. Thousands of tons of rock, shale, and sandstone gave way 50 feet behind them. The main haulage road. The lights flickered and died. Total, absolute darkness. Sound off. Miller screamed. "Here!" Elias yelled, his voice sounding small in the sudden quiet. "Here!" yelled Silas. "Here!" yelled two others. They were alive, but they were trapped. The collapse had sealed them into a pocket of the mine, perhaps 100 yards long. The air was still flowing, but weakly. The line curtain had been torn down. Elias clicked on his cap lamp. The beam cut through the swirling dust. The way back was a wall of jagged rock. They were buried 600 feet beneath the surface of the earth. The first hour was chaos. Checking for injuries, checking the methane monitor, checking the water supplies. They had 3 canteens and 4 working lights. The second hour was realization. They weren't getting out tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. Elias sat with his back against the pillar of coal. the cold dampness seeping into his coveralls. He turned his light off to save the battery. In the dark, the silence returned, and in that silence, Elias finally understood what Sarah had been trying to tell him. He wasn't thinking about the coal. He wasn't thinking about the house on the ridge. He was thinking about the way Sarah's hair caught the light in the morning. He was thinking about the unfinished argument, the last words he had said to her being words of stubborn pride. If I die down here, he thought, panic rising in his chest like bile, she will think I chose this place over her. Above ground, the siren wailed. 3 long blasts. The sound tore through the town of Black Creek like a knife. Sarah was asleep when it happened. She woke with a start, her heart already racing. She knew, before the phone rang, before the neighbor pounded on the door, she knew. She didn't cry, not yet. She threw on her coat over her nightgown, shoved her feet into boots, and ran. She ran the mile to the mine gate. The scene was a nightmare bathed in floodlights. Trucks, ambulances, men shouting. The families were gathering by the chain-link fence. The wives, the mothers, the children. It was a tableau of Appalachian grief, a scene played out for 100 years in these hills. Sarah pushed her way to the front. She saw the mine superintendent, a man named Henderson, looking grim. "Who is it?" she demanded, grabbing his arm. "Section 5 collapse," Henderson said, his voice low. "Elias, Miller, Silas, and 2 others. We can't reach them on the mine phone." Sarah's knees gave out. 2 women caught her. They led her to the waiting room, the cinder block building where the families waited. It smelled of stale coffee and fear. For 2 days, they waited 48 hours. Down below, time had lost its meaning. The air was getting bad. The carbon dioxide was building up. Elias felt heavy, his limbs like lead. His head pounded with a rhythm that matched his heart. They had stopped talking hours ago to save oxygen. They just lay there in the dark, listening to the mountains settle. Elias drifted into a hallucination. He saw the house on Hickory Ridge. It was finished. There was smoke coming from the chimney. Sarah was on the porch, holding a baby. She was waving to him. "Come home, Elias," she whispered in his mind. "Come home." "I can't," he murmured aloud, his voice raspy. "I'm trapped." "You have to fight," the vision said. "You promised." Elias forced his eyes open. The darkness was absolute. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the only thing he had, the velvet box. He hadn't given it to her yet to keep. He had been carrying it for luck. He squeezed it so hard the corners dug into his palm. "I am not dying here," he whispered to the stone. "You hear me? I am not dying in this hole." He grabbed a wrench and began to tap on the roof bolts. Clang, clang, clang. Rhythmic, loud. It was the signal. Up above, the rescue teams were drilling a probe hole. They were listening with geophones, sensitive devices that could hear a pin drop through rock. "Hold up," the rescue captain shouted. Quiet on the drill, silence on the surface. Then, faintly, through the headphones, clang, clang. "We got M." The cheer that went up from the drill site was heard all the way to the waiting room. Sarah looked up from her styrofoam cup, her eyes red-rimmed, her face gray with exhaustion. "They found them," she whispered. "They're alive, honey," an old miner's wife said, hugging her. "They're alive." The rescue took another 12 hours. They had to drill a rescue shaft, a narrow tube just big enough for a capsule. When the capsule finally came up the first time, it brought Silas, then Miller. Sarah stood at the edge of the cordon, her hands gripping the wire fence until her fingers bled. The capsule went down again. Minutes dragged like hours. Then, the winch wind, straining. The capsule breached the surface. The door opened. A man stumbled out, covered in black slime, his eyes squinting against the floodlights. He looked like a creature born of the earth. But Sarah knew the set of those shoulders. "Elias!" she screamed, breaking through the line of state troopers. He turned. He saw her, and the big man, the one who moved mountains, crumbled. He fell to his knees, not from weakness, but from gratitude. Sarah hit him like a tackle. She didn't care about the slime, the coal muck, the smell of fear and sweat. She buried her face in his neck, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm sorry," Elias croaked, his voice wrecked by the bad air. "I'm so sorry." "Shut up," she cried, holding his face in her hands. "Just breathe. Just breathe." Elias looked at her, his face a mask of soot, except for the tracks of tears cutting through the black. "I heard you," he whispered. "In the dark, I heard you calling me." "I never stopped," she said. "I never stopped calling you." They sat there on the gravel, under the harsh lights of the mine yard, holding each other, while the paramedics waited. The crowd cheered, but Elias and Sarah didn't hear them. They were in a world of their own, a world where the only thing that mattered was the beat of the other's heart. Elias never went back to the face. He didn't quit the industry entirely. Coal was all he knew, and he was a man of the mountains. But he took a job as a safety inspector. He spent his days teaching young miners how to read the roof, how to spot the danger before it buried them. He traded the cutter for a clipboard, the darkness for the classroom. They built the house on Hickory Ridge. It took a little longer, and the lumber wasn't the most expensive kind, but it was sturdy. 10 years later, on a warm evening in July, Elias sat on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in purples and oranges. The coal dust was gone from his skin, though a faint cough still lingered in his chest, a reminder of the price he had paid. Sarah came out with 2 glasses of iced tea. She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. They watched their 2 children chasing fireflies in the yard. "You thinking about it?" Sarah asked softly. Elias looked down at the valley, where the lights of the mine twinkled in the distance. He looked at his hands, clean now, but still scarred. "No," he said, taking her hand and kissing the knuckles. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am to be seeing this sunset." "You deserved it," she said. "We deserved it," he corrected. "The coal mine gives, and the coal mine takes." It had taken his father. It had tried to take him, but love, stubborn and enduring as the mountain itself, had pulled him back. Elias Thorne watched the fireflies dance against the gathering dark, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of the night, because he knew that no matter how dark it got, there was a light waiting for him on the porch.